Washington, D.C. was unusually tense that morning. The air was heavy, not with humidity, but with anticipation. For weeks, the Beltway had been buzzing about a secret congressional hearing that was rumored to be unlike anything seen before. The topic? A massive oversight investigation into the misuse of federal power, and the hearing would pit none other than Pam Bondi, U.S. Attorney General under President Donald Trump, against longtime House Judiciary Committee member Jerry Nadler. Pam walked into the Capitol building with poise. Dressed in a crisp navy blue suit, her heels clicked assertively against the marbled floors as reporters shouted questions. She said nothing, flashing a calm, confident smile. She had spent years in the trenches as Florida's Attorney General, but since taking the reins at the Justice Department under Trump's second term, Pam had become the administration's fiercest defender and the swamp's worst nightmare. The hearing room was packed. Spectators, press, and lawmakers all packed in like sardines. Nadler sat at the head of the long, mahogany desk, a stack of papers before him. His eyes were tired but determined. He had waited for this moment, the chance to corner the Trump administration, to put Bondi on the spot over allegations that federal law enforcement had selectively prosecuted political opponents. Pam Bondi took her seat and leaned slightly into the mic. The room fell silent. Madam Attorney General, Nadler began, adjusting his glasses. You are here today to answer serious questions about your department's role in it. Pam calmly interrupted. Congressman Nadler, I'll gladly answer every question. But let's make one thing clear, this isn't about oversight. This is political theater. A hushed murmur spread across the room. Nadler blinked, thrown off momentarily by her directness. We are here to hold your office accountable, Attorney General. There are claims, very serious claims, that your department has refused to prosecute allies of the president while unfairly targeting his critics. Pam's eyes narrowed slightly. Is that what you're calling this? Accountability? Or is it retaliation because we opened an investigation into how billions of federal dollars were redirected by Democratic lawmakers into shell organizations posing as NGOs? The room gasped. That hadn't leaked yet. The press immediately began scribbling notes. Nadler's voice rose. Are you suggesting, without evidence, that members of this body have committed fraud? Pam opened a folder and slid several documents across the desk toward Nadler. Not suggesting. Proving. These are internal emails and financial transaction records verified by 2 independent auditing firms. Your name appears in several of them. Nadler froze. He hadn't seen this coming. Behind him, a few of his Democratic colleagues glanced nervously at each other. Pam continued, her tone even and professional. The American people deserve better than the political vendettas you and your allies have been carrying out. You talk about the rule of law when it suits you. But when it threatens your interests, suddenly it's a witch hunt. Nadler tried to regain footing. This is outrageous. These documents, this hearing, none of it was on the agenda. You're violating protocol. Pam leaned forward. So did you, Congressman, when you signed off on federal grants funneled into fake legal aid organizations in New York, which, by the way, sent over $2 million to political PACs last cycle. The room was dead silent again. No one moved. No one whispered. All eyes were on the firestorm unfolding in real time. Just then, Congressman Jim Jordan leaned in from the Republican side and smirked. Mr. Chairman, I move to enter these documents into the record. Nadler didn't respond. He looked down, red-faced, sweating. The swamp was starting to shake, and Pam Bondi had just pulled the trigger. In the hours following the explosive hearing, the Capitol was in complete chaos. Every major media outlet, even some that had long been hostile to Trump's administration, was scrambling to verify the documents Pam Bondi had dropped like thunderbolts into the heart of Congress. Fox News, Newsmax, and OAN were already running headlines. Bombshell. Bondi connects Nadler to NGO fraud. Attorney General accuses top Democrat of misuse of funds. Pam Bondi's moment. Swamp cracks open live on camera. But the real storm wasn't just in the headlines. It was behind closed doors. Inside Democratic strategy rooms, panic was setting in. Staffers were pulling all-nighters trying to get ahead of the story. To spin it, bury it. Anything but confront the ugly truth that had just spilled into daylight. Meanwhile, in the White House, President Donald Trump was in high spirits. That's my girl, he reportedly said to his chief of staff, watching the hearing replay with a Diet Coke in one hand and a grin on his face. She just took down Jerry like it was nothing. Nadler looked like a wet sponge out there. Back on Capitol Hill, Pam Bondi sat in her office, calm and composed, sipping tea. She had spent years collecting the data. Her department had quietly opened investigations into NGO fraud a year ago, following a suspicious pattern of grant money flowing into community outreach groups that never held a single event, or worse, funded political messaging disguised as education. It was her idea to delay going public. Timing is everything, she had told her staff months earlier. And we're not just draining the swamp, we're exposing the pipe system it uses to pump corruption straight into the bloodstream of this country. Her strategy was paying off. By noon the next day, a whistleblower came forward. Someone inside one of the NGOs based in Brooklyn. The man, a mid-level accountant, confirmed that several grant applications were ghostwritten by congressional aides and funneled through fake boards. His sworn affidavit named 4 members of Congress, including Nadler. Now, even CNN had to cover it. They tried softening the language, calling it an emerging story and a developing controversy. But the tide was turning. In a heated press conference, Pam Bondi doubled down. "No one is above the law," she declared, standing on the steps of the Department of Justice. "Whether you wear a Republican tie or a Democrat lapel pin, if you misuse taxpayer money, we're coming for you. That's not politics, that's justice." She didn't flinch, didn't blink, even as angry protesters shouted from a distance. Her resolve was ironclad. Jerry Nadler, however, was spiraling. Inside his private office, surrounded by advisors and lawyers, he was furious. "She set me up," he growled. "She ambushed me in public. But the documents, they're real," one aide said carefully. Nadler slammed his fist down. "I don't care. This is a political hit job. We've got to fight back. Release something on her. Leak whatever you can." The room went silent. Even his loyalists were nervous. The tide was against them. Elsewhere, Bondi's inner circle knew Nadler wouldn't go down quietly. "He'll try to discredit you," her deputy warned. "Dig up something from your past. Probably Florida stuff." Pam smirked. "Let him try. I've been preparing for this moment since the Mueller circus. I've cleaned up every corner. I'm not the one hiding skeletons. He is." Behind her, a digital screen lit up with a map. Red lines connecting names, organizations, PACs, and wire transfers. It looked like a web, and at the center of it was a name in bold red. Jerry Nadler. Pam turned to her team. Time to bring in phase 2. If Nadler thought that hearing was the end, he's about to find out it was just the beginning. 2 days after the hearing, Washington was still spinning. But Pam Bondi? She was just getting started. A sealed indictment had just been unsealed in the Southern District of New York. It named 2 executives from an NGO called Urban Growth Initiative, which had received over $32 million in federal funding, most of it from appropriations championed by Nadler. The charges: wire fraud, conspiracy, money laundering, and illegal campaign contributions. The indictment referenced a public official for a not-so-subtle hint at Nadler himself. Social media was ablaze. Conservative influencers called it the hashtag Bondi bomb. Even centrists started to take notice. Pam didn't speak to the press that morning. Instead, she went into what her team jokingly called war mode. Meetings were tight, concise. Her Justice Department staff was buzzing with energy. She delegated tasks like a general preparing for battle. "Make sure the FBI has everything it needs to raid UGI's headquarters," she instructed. "And get me the full transcript of Nadler's Appropriations Committee remarks from 2022. Every word." The legal strategy was clear: make Nadler squirm under the weight of the very system he had once used to protect his allies. But Nadler wasn't giving up. That same afternoon, he held his own press conference on Capitol Hill. His voice cracked slightly as he spoke, but he put on a brave face. "This is nothing but a political witch hunt designed to distract from the authoritarian conduct of this administration," he said. "Pam Bondi is weaponizing the Justice Department to settle political scores." He even waved a manila envelope. "And we have evidence she met privately with President Trump just 24 hours before the hearing. This calls her entire investigation into question." Mainstream media latched onto that line immediately. MSNBC, the New York Times, and even some moderate voices began asking, is Bondi going rogue? But it didn't matter, because Pam Bondi had already anticipated this. The following morning, she released White House visitor logs voluntarily. The visit in question? It was about national security policy attended by 7 other cabinet members. Her meeting with Trump lasted less than 10 minutes and had nothing to do with Nadler or any investigation. Then came the real kicker. The DOJ released body cam footage from a whistleblower raid conducted 6 months earlier. The video showed a senior executive at Urban Growth Initiative admitting that Representative Nadler's office told us exactly how to write the grant application. He even named a staffer. Boom. The so-called counteroffensive from Nadler had backfired catastrophically. Even the Washington Post ran a headline that read, "Pam Bondi's receipts leave Nadler struggling for credibility." Inside the White House, Trump was euphoric. "This is better than ratings week on The Apprentice," he laughed to reporters. Pam's got more guts than half the swamp put together. Back in her DOJ office, Pam remained composed. Her phone buzzed every few minutes. Reporters, congressmen, cabinet members. She ignored most of them. One message stood out, though. It was a secure communication from a confidential source. New leak. Nadler tied to offshore accounts. Ready to verify. Need to meet. Tonight. She turned to her aide. It's time. They would meet in a parking garage in Arlington, Virginia. Classic spy movie style. As her SUV rolled out of D.C., Pam thought to herself, I didn't come to Washington to make friends. I came to clean it out. And if this leak was what she thought it was, Nadler wasn't the only one going down. The night was unusually cold for April in D.C. Pam Bondi pulled her coat tight around her shoulders as she stepped out of the black Suburban. The underground garage in Arlington was nearly empty, the dim overhead lights flickering just enough to cast shadows that seemed to move on their own. Her security detail stayed close but out of earshot as she approached the lone figure waiting near a pillar marked B2. The man wore a faded hoodie, his hands shoved into his pockets. His face was partially obscured by the hood, but Pam recognized him immediately. It was David Kessler, a former financial analyst at the Department of Treasury and a known whistleblower. He had disappeared from public view nearly 8 months ago after hinting at corruption within congressional oversight committees. Most people thought he'd fled the country. He hadn't. I didn't trust anyone else, David said in a low voice. But after what you did to Nadler on the Hill, I figured you might actually do something with this. From his coat, he pulled out a flash drive and handed it to her. What's on it? Pam asked. Swiss banking records. Cayman Islands transfers. All routed through shell companies tied to congressional community development projects. And you're not going to believe the names involved. It's not just Nadler. It's a cabal. Pam raised an eyebrow. How high up does it go? Think Ways and Means Committee, Judiciary, even State Department grant channels. You're looking at decades of laundering under the guise of aid, community outreach, and climate resilience funds. Pam's heart raced, but her face stayed like stone. You sure this is real? David looked her dead in the eye. I risked my life to bring it to you. If this gets out, Washington doesn't just shake. It collapses. Pam nodded slowly. Then we better do this right. She returned to her vehicle, hand tight around the flash drive like it was a key to the Republic's soul. Back at the DOJ war room, her team began cross-referencing the offshore accounts, company names, and project grants. It was all there. One shell company, Emerald Bridge Consulting, had received over $74 million in funding between 2019 and 2023. A community housing consultancy. It hadn't built a single home. Guess who sat on the advisory board? Jerry Nadler's son. That was enough to ignite the powder keg. By morning, Pam Bondi had authorized federal warrants for 3 arrests and issued subpoenas to several high-ranking congressional aides. She called a press conference, one that would change the political landscape of America. I did not come here to play politics, Pam began, standing before the American flag. I came here to serve justice. We now have irrefutable evidence of systemic abuse of public funds funneled through sham organizations and directed by individuals entrusted with the highest responsibilities of our government. Reporters erupted with questions, but Pam wasn't finished. Effective immediately, my office is launching a full-scale investigation into congressional misappropriation of NGO funds, offshore laundering, and illegal campaign finance. No one, and I mean no one, will be shielded from the truth. At the end, she left the podium and said 4 simple words to her aide. Nadler goes first. Today. An hour later, as Jerry Nadler was preparing for a live interview on MSNBC, he received the news he never thought he'd hear in his life. Congressman Nadler, you are under federal investigation. We have a warrant to search your office and seize all relevant materials. He was stunned. His face went white as the cameras were shut off and the producer whispered, "We're cutting the segment." Pam Bondi watched the footage from her office. She didn't smile. She didn't gloat. But inside, she knew the swamp had just been cracked wide open. And she was holding the hammer. By noon the next day, all of Washington was on edge. CNN ran an emergency cheer-in. Pam Bondi explodes Nadler scandal, DOJ raids underway across D.C. The Justice Department's building was surrounded by media vans. Inside, a secure conference was underway with President Trump dialed in from the Oval Office. Pam Bondi, composed as ever, stood at the head of the table. Around her sat senior DOJ attorneys, FBI officials, and forensic accountants. We're executing simultaneous raids at 5 NGO headquarters, seizing servers and detaining high-ranking staffers, she reported. 2 have already flipped. They're naming names. Trump's voice crackled through the speaker. You've done what nobody thought possible, Pam. We've got the proof now. But America needs to hear it straight from you. Pam nodded. I'll go live tonight. That evening, 8 p.m. Eastern, every major network, even CNN and MSNBC, couldn't resist the breaking gravity of what was unfolding. Pam Bondi stepped up to the podium in the DOJ press room, flanked by the American flag and the seal of the Department of Justice. Her voice was calm but powerful. Over the past several months, my office has uncovered one of the largest corruption networks in the history of our government. This is not just about Congressman Nadler, though his involvement is clear and damning. This is about an entrenched political class that has used its influence to steal from the very citizens they were elected to serve. We have hard evidence, financial records, recorded phone calls, whistleblower testimony, and forged grant paperwork that links millions in taxpayer funds to personal enrichment and illegal political financing. The country was glued to their screens. Social media went into overdrive. Hashtag Drain the Swamp, hashtag Bondi Truth, and hashtag Nadlergate trended worldwide. Then Pam dropped the bombshell. Based on the totality of the evidence, I have directed the Department of Justice to pursue formal charges of fraud, bribery, and money laundering against Congressman Jerry Nadler. In addition, I am recommending an ethics review of no less than 9 other sitting members of Congress. Gasps erupted from reporters. Phones were lighting up across the chamber like flashbulbs. And then Pam revealed something no one saw coming. This isn't about partisanship. This is about justice. And while I serve under President Trump, I have worked independently with integrity and within the bounds of the Constitution. Because if we allow corruption to fester in silence, we lose the soul of our republic. It was a moment that even longtime critics couldn't ignore. By 9 p.m., Jerry Nadler had formally resigned, avoiding immediate arrest but promising to cooperate with investigators. Meanwhile, the DOJ announced that the first of several trials would begin in the fall. Across the country, people from both sides of the aisle were stunned, shocked, and, in many places, relieved. Finally, someone had dared to swing the hammer at the rotting heart of D.C. The following day, a cartoon in the New York Post showed Pam Bondi in armor, standing on the Capitol steps, swamp water draining beneath her feet. The caption read, "Pam Bondi, the woman who did what no man could." Even the Wall Street Journal praised her in a front-page editorial. Love her or hate her, Pam Bondi just rewrote the rulebook on justice in Washington. Later that week, while attending a town hall in Ohio, President Trump looked into the crowd and said, "Remember this moment. Because years from now, when they ask how the swamp started to drain, you'll tell them it started with Pam." And back in her office, Pam Bondi sat quietly, sipping black coffee, reviewing yet another file. The fight wasn't over. Not by a long shot. Because the swamp wasn't just shaking anymore.